G'day guys, welcome back to my fish room. It's been a hot minute since I put anything up on YouTube, and for good reason. I've been flat out in the preparation of building Fish Room 3.0. And if it's your first time seeing this ugly mug, wait till the end of this video, jump across to my channel and have a look at some of the videos where it explains why I'm building a new fish room from scratch, literally from scratch. And hopefully you can join me on the journey of completing that room, entering some breeding, and I suppose upskilling myself with advice from you. In any case, the main reason you're here today is because of duckweed and its maintenance. And have I got a hot tip for you on how I manage duckweed here in my fish room, and hopefully you can use it in your home aquarium or fish room as well. But firstly, without going into too much detail, what is duckweed? There is a plethora of videos out there on YouTube about duckweed. If you want to take that deep dive, go for it, knock your socks off. However, just broadly speaking, duckweed is a generalized term for 5 different genera of plant types that habitate water surfaces throughout the globe. Landoltia, Wolffia, Lemna, Spirodella and Wolffiella. Generally speaking, the duckweed that I'm looking at here on the surface of my tank could be a completely different species of plant to what you're calling duckweed on the surface of your tank wherever you live geographically. What does that mean? Not a whole lot. It's a broad term. However, the pros and cons of duckweed are all the same. What are the pros and cons? The pros. Duckweed is an extreme powerhouse at removing phosphates, nitrates and some heavy metals out of your water column. It's an ideal indicator of the health and well-being of your water. So if you've got a heavy fish load producing a lot of waste, the duckweed will actually explode in its population. It's a really rapid reproducer of itself. If the waste production in your tank is quite minimal, it will stay at a reasonable level and not get too thick on the surface of your tank. It provides shade to your tank, so it actually provides a little bit of comfort. You know, those shy fish that you have in your aquarium, some of the apistogrammas and things like that I keep, will actually emerge from the tank knowing that there's no threat from above. Well, not knowing, but it minimises that effect. The fact that it's shading your aquarium and is so good at the uptake of nutrients actually combats algae growth. So if you've recently had an outbreak of blackbeard or hair algae or something like that, it may actually be a good thing to put duckweed into that tank to combat that growth. And then once the algae has reduced in its size, or you've knocked it completely on its head, remove the duckweed using my method. What else is duckweed good for? It's a great microhabitat for fry and smallmouth fish species. Because of its life cycle being so fast, when duckweed hits the end of its life cycle, it actually starts to break down and becomes a food source for things like infusoria. I personally use it in some of my better breeding projects where I'll take handfuls of duckweeds out of an already cycled tank and place it into a new tank where bubble nesting bedders will go and lay their nests. The duckweed helps hold it together. But when those fry hatch and emerge from their eggs that first couple of days, they've got a readily available food source in that infusoria and microorganisms that are there on the surface. Free food for fry. All right, what are some of the negatives? Unfortunately, some of those positives can be real negatives for us in the aquarium. The fact that duckweed reproduces itself so fast and so readily, it can combat the plants that we want to grow in our aquariums, substrate plants and epiphytic plants that we might have in our scapes, taking away nutrients that we might be actually adding to our aquarium for good reason. What else? The fact that if the duckweed gets too advanced and is too thick in your aquarium, in the natural gas exchange of plants, releasing a lot of oxygen in the day, however taking up a lot of oxygen at night. So if you happen to come out to your fish tank in the morning and your water movement's not enough or the aeration isn't enough and you see your fish are gasping at the surface, it could well be that the duckweed in its population is taking up a lot of that oxygen, dissolved oxygen from your water column in the evenings. Just food for thought. Not only that, some fish just don't like it. I keep Corydoras species. They often shoot to the surface to get a gulp of air and return to the substrate. Imagine if there's a thick layer of duckweed there and they can't perform that act. They're relying on the dissolved oxygen that is in the tank. Also, some of my wild betters are air breathing, and they'll come to the surface and again do a similar act where they'll gulp for air and return under the surface. And that's because the environment that they live in may be of higher pH and lower oxygen concentration within the water column, but that's their natural environment and that's what they do to survive. What's another negative? The fact that you can't put your hand into the tank or a net into the tank or remove some plants without transferring that duckweed across. I don't like the thought that I can catch fish for sale at our local fish fair at the Aquarium Society and I'm going to transfer duckweed to someone else's tank without them knowing, or inadvertently put it on some plants and that plant matter is going to someone else's tank when they don't want it. There's been many a time when I've had to put my arm into a tank to alter substrate or move a piece of aquascape, and I've come out looking like the Incredible Hulk. Frustrating for me. However, I do know, as I've stated, there are some really good pros to having duckweed in the fish room. Let's get down to the maintenance. Wet, dry vacuums. Get yourself a good sized wet, dry vacuum and utilise it when you're doing a water change on your tank. If you have duckweed on the surface, or maybe riccia or other floating plants that you don't actually desire having so much on the surface of your tank, use a wet, dry vac. Disclaimer, please be sure to read the instructions. You are using a powered voltage, depending on where you're from, for me 240 volt appliance with water. So make sure you know the operation. Do yourself a favour, remove the paper bag from that vacuum before you use it. As well as, on my model, there was a sponge that would protect the intake that also can be removed. Most wet dry vacuums have a floating valve or a floating block off that will prevent water entering the motor area of your vacuum.
Okay, time to put my money where my mouth is. Here is the nozzle of my wet dry vacuum or shop vac, and I've got it resting just above the water surface, and it's enough to create a bit of a venturi or a suction that the duckweed is pulling into the vacuum and not too much water. And you can see the fast rate at which the duckweed is pulling from all corners of the tank and going up into the vacuum. Pretty impressive, really. And given that this method will remove a majority of your duckweed, and I'm saying a majority because you still have to use some sort of method to remove the duckweed. As you can see it up on the edges of my fish tank, and I just use like a scourer pad or whatever to push those back into the water column after I've used the vacuum to try and remove as much as I can. So the water level will come down to a point, and then I run the nozzle of the vacuum all around the edge of the tank and try to remove as much as I can, and then manually using the scourer, as I said, push that into the water column and repeat the process. And you may still find, duckweed does adhere to plants under the water surface and it can come back to the surface to bite you, but if your maintenance is regular, unlike it was on this tank, you'll be fine. Alright, and here's a different rack. This is the fry grower rack that I use, that I've been sitting in front of for most of the video, but you can see this tank actually has guppies in it, and I'm moving the nozzle of the vacuum all around the tank just in order to pick it up. So I couldn't hold it in one location because of the livestock in the tank. Guppies aren't known for their smarts when it comes to being caught in anything. However, if you are careful and you do have livestock in your tank, you'll manage to clean the duckweed off without any issue. All right, and finally, this is what it looks like when you've sucked up all that water and duckweed into your vacuum. Not a whole lot of water, but a lot of duckweed has been removed in a short amount of time. You can see here back in the tank that in this one as well, I need to push that duckweed down into the water surface and revisit it. And there is duckweed stuck in some of the Java moss. So it's undoubtedly going to reappear in this tank, and my maintenance needs to be continued. All right, and this is the tank 2 days later. You'll be able to see that those with a little bit of livestock in them still have some duckweed left, like the one here on the end. However, 90% plus of the duckweed has been removed. It's been a success.
Okay guys, well there you have it, using a vacuum in your fish room. Who would have thought? I picked up the tip from watching some aquascapers do dry starts on their fish tanks by removing the residual amount of water and substrate that was left in their tanks and applied it to duckweed. If you happen to use this method and you think it's a good idea, or you've got a better method, please let me know down below. I know that there's a lot of 3D printed devices out there. There's skimmers that you can attach to your filters, of course. However, not all those applications suit. As well as I know this application wouldn't suit if you only had a small tank. You're not going to be sucking all of the water out of your tank using a vacuum cleaner in one hit. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the content. I want to give a thumbs up to all the other YouTubers out there that are doing aquarium content and related content. I'm a big fan, and doing this little YouTube channel has really opened my eyes up to the efforts that you all put in. So thank you so much. And if you're not a member of a local club, in respect of your aquarium clubs, get out there, get into it. I'm currently the president of the Aquarium Society of Victoria, which is based in Melbourne, Victoria, at Clifton Hill. We'd love to have visitors to our club, and I'm sure other clubs around the world would be the same. Come down, visit us, enjoy the social aspect of the hobby. It's really important. You meet local breeders, plant growers, shrimp breeders. You can pick up all sorts of tips and tricks from the horse's mouth. Not everything gets conveyed really well in YouTube world. However, when you are in an environment with like-minded people enjoying the hobby, it's amazing what you'll discover. In any case, please join me on the build of Fish Room 3.0. I'd love to have you on the journey. I'm going to document it as best as I can as I build it literally from dirt to active fish room, breeding fish, and transition from this fish room to that one. Enjoy your day. Hope the hobby's going positive for you. Thanks for your time. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.